Hi everyone, welcome to the All Inclusive podcast, where each week I chat with industry experts and diversity, equity, inclusion executives from the world's leading global brands who share their knowledge, experience, and actionable takeaways to help inclusive employers create cultures of belonging where everyone can thrive. Today, I'm joined by Jessie Spellman, Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at Walmart. Hi Jessie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Natasha. It's great to be here.
Let us kick things off by just telling our listeners a little bit about you and your journey to where you are today.
Sure. So my name is Jessie. My pronouns are she, her. I like to start at the very beginning because I think when you see these three little letters next to a person's name, it's really important to understand what brought them to this work. So I am white, and I grew up in a white neighborhood, like most Americans who grew up here. And I was really ignorant and naive about race my entire upbringing, in part due to the homogeneity of my hometown, and in part due to the real lack of like a comprehensive history curriculum in my public school. So when I got to college in Philadelphia, I realized Martin Luther King did not fix all of America's problems like I had been taught. And I decided to really study this phenomenon full time, the phenomenon being systemic racism and other systems of oppression. I started out as a public school teacher. I loved working with students, and it was my time spent in Philadelphia public schools that really opened my eyes to the vast inequity that is all around us in this country and around the world. And my first 2 years in the classroom, I realized two things. One, rightly or wrongly, this environment was probably not the one where I was going to learn the skills that I needed to enact change on the scale that I was hoping to. And number two, this wasn't the best use of the unearned advantages of my identity. As a cis, straight, white woman, I have the access and I make people comfortable in ways that I think are really powerful. And I know that people will listen to me by nature of those unearned advantages of my identity. Where I was teaching, 100% of my students were Black, and 90% of the teachers were white women like me. It wasn't my place. I wasn't from the community that I was teaching in. I didn't live in the community that I was teaching in. I was really a cultural tourist. And so I started to reflect on where are the spheres of real power and influence where I can enact large scale change. And that was corporate America. So I made a pretty big pivot to working at Bain & Company. And I learned so much about organizational effectiveness, transformational leadership, and telling stories through data. I learned a lot during that time, but I remained passionate and steadfast on my ultimate goal, which is that of dismantling the systems of oppression that hold so many people back. Fast forward, I got an MBA and I went back to Bain, and then I was asked to lead the inclusion roadmap. They added this word inclusion to the work that they were doing. So I took a step away from my client-facing work and leaned into the work that I had studied academically and was really passionate about. And over time, things changed. I started to examine more critically the revenue structure of a professional services organization. And what I mean by that is when you are a B2B organization, your business culture is inevitably going to be permeated by the businesses and the clients that you're serving. So while I was proud of some of the work that was going on at Bain, when Bainies went to certain client sites, there wasn't the same culture of inclusion. And I also frankly disagreed with some of our DEI leadership's approach to these topics. I did not think Walmart is where I would end up next, to be honest, but I met the person who hired me, and she was building out the DEI team in the talent function, the talent center of excellence at Walmart, and asked me to join and lead the team. And I've been there now for a little over a year.
Oh, fantastic. That sounds like a great journey. So for you, as you said your goal is to dismantle the oppression that is stopping our demographic and as ethnic minorities in being able to really thrive within the workplace. Why is that your goal?
It's just the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do first and foremost, and secondly, it's holding all of us back. These interlocking systems of oppression, of whether they be gender roles, or they be the pedigree that you're meant to have to get a job in corporate America, they are really limiting. And I really believe it's not even about what I believe. All of the empirical evidence is there that shows DEI contributes to the bottom line. We're creating a false choice between a more inclusive world and a more profitable one. I do not believe that we have to make that choice. I really believe that by investing and celebrating everybody's diversity and uniqueness, and recognizing and having an honest reckoning with our history, and I'm speaking from an American perspective because I'm an American, but this obviously permeates the world. I'm well aware of America's influence around the globe, as well as how different we are from a lot of other countries. It's just we got to wake up. We got to wake up. We can't wait any longer.
Yeah, and I think the recent events that happened during COVID with George Floyd really shook the whole entire world, and it definitely shook up America. And I totally agree. I think now is the time, if any, to start making some real headway and some real change. And I think there's a lot of work that's being done. And for you, as we just spoke about in terms of like kind of like looking at what we've been doing in the past, what do you think needs to happen now so that we don't repeat those past mistakes?
Something that America has not done is have an honest reckoning with our history. What Germany has done, as an example, and the way that Germany remembers the millions of people who were murdered based on their identity, and the way that Germany talks about its Nazi history and reckons with it openly and honestly, is antithetical to the American approach right now. There is a tremendous movement in this country towards revisionist history, where we, because we are embarrassed or we don't want to admit it or we don't want to reckon honestly with our history, we omit parts of it and we use euphemisms to describe what actually happened and how America was born. We say that we are a country born on freedom. We are a country born on enslaving other human beings based on the color of their skin, and using that as justification for that continued enslavement to benefit the economy. That is our honest history. This is not to make anybody feel ashamed or to make anybody feel bad. This is to have an honest reckoning with what has happened so that we can rebuild and move forward. Unless you are able to clearly articulate the problem, we are not going to move forward. And this is so important to talk about in American politics right now because of the wave of domestic terrorism that we are facing by white nationalists and white supremacists who are using what has become mainstream media to justify their violence, their murder. And that violence and murder, as we've seen in the US, there was a murderous rampage at a Taiwanese church, and there was a murderous rampage at a Black grocery store. And these are all directly linked to what half of our political makeup is pontificating about on the news. These falsehoods about how this country came about. We need to be honest. We need to look our history square in the face, and we need to talk about it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I'm from the UK, and so our history is going to be different from America, but it's not too far different at all either. And we too, I don't believe, really share enough about our actual history. And I think it's a common thing in terms of when you're wanting to make a change. We always say, and with organizations and from other leaders that I've spoken to, when they're coming into wanting to change an organization, to change its culture, to be more inclusive, you've got to first figure out where you're at, where you've come from, how you've gotten there, what's the root cause of the problem, to then be able to work out the best way to approach it and to solve it and to make that change. And as a country, I completely agree. If you don't really understand how we even got here, how did we get this far from just being normal human beings and valuing life above all else, not because, oh, you're white and I'm black, or she says she's a woman and actually no, she wants to be in love with someone of the same sex. That shouldn't be a problem. We should all be able to be who our true selves. And I totally agree. So I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah.
No, it's great. I mean, the best piece of it, I got married recently.
Oh,
and
yeah. Congratulations.
Thank you. And the best advice that I think we got was, remember that, it's never you versus him. It's the both of you versus the problem you're facing. And so we have to, in the greater public sphere, and by the way, DEI is inherently political. Martin Luther King was a very political person, and he was murdered. A lot of people think by the United States government, but we won't go there, because of his political activity. Right. So, and he was held as a political prisoner in American prisons, and his right to assemble and to protest, his First Amendment rights were extremely curtailed, and he was imprisoned for that. This is political work. Advocating for human rights is inherently political work. And we have to remember, this is not Republican versus Democrat here in the US, or the Labor Party versus the other parties in other parts of the world. This is truly a battle for how are we going to continue to live together. It's all together. It needs to be us versus the problems of poverty, us versus the problems of racism, us versus these problems that are just climate change, these problems that we as humanity need to invest in. So sorry, I'll pivot back to DEI and how this is all related. In my day-to-day, it's really critically about how do we ensure that we are treating people how they want to be treated. And I'll say that again. It's not how you want to be treated. It's the platinum rule. So the golden rule is treat others how you want to be treated. The platinum rule is treat others how they want to be treated. And you do that by engaging in a honest, curious conversation with everybody you meet, and that you are always willing to take somebody else's perspective. And I think it's this element of perspective taking that we all need to make. I am from New York. I do a terrible job of taking the perspective of people who live in the southeast of my country, states like Alabama and Mississippi, states I've never been to. I need to do a much better job of putting myself in their shoes, and vice versa. We all need to do a better job of that. And I really think that that's where DEI starts.
Yeah, no, totally. And how do you go about doing that? What would you say is one of the key steps to take to do that?
It's really hard, especially in a country that's really segregated and where we live and work in silos. But I think the number one thing is just diversify your media. Think about where you're getting your news from. Think about where you're I love to read. So I always try to read novels from people of all different backgrounds. The people that I follow on social media, on Instagram, on Twitter, trying to get just lots of different perspectives. Even when those perspectives sometimes upset me, it's really important to understand everyone's perspective, because we need to engage in dialogue, I think, ultimately, to make a difference. And so, it's hard for me not to begin talking about all of these societal implications of these things, especially with the attack on women's rights as well here in the US, because I really think that there is a straight line to the leaderships, the far right leadership styles of what's going on in Europe as well. The president of Hungary is hosting the American Conservative Party in his country, and American conservatives are looking to him, who is a pretty professed white nationalist, as an example of political discourse that we should be engaging in. That should make us all alarmed, including white people. That is not the country that we want to live in. That's not the place that we want to live in. I don't know about you, but I was holding my breath when at how close Marine Le Pen came to winning that election in France. And so we really have to remember that the world is changing very fast. And the old guard is seeing everything that they have known in their world. I'm putting myself in their perspective. It's changing really, really rapidly. And so I understand that human desire to hold on and to really hunker down. But I think that we really need to talk about this. We need to call it what it is, which is a dangerous form of white supremacy and a dangerous form of terrorism that is terrorizing people, not only in the US, but around the world.
I completely agree. It's refreshing and it's great to hear from somebody who is passionate on this, because I think we need more passionate people. And that's where it starts. The conversation starts. And as you said, we just need to diversify where it is that you're getting your material from, the media that you're getting all of this information from. And it feeds through into those discussions which people talk about in terms of finding the right talent. If you're only going to outlets that only cater to people that are graduates, or that go to a particular university, which is historically known for only really letting in all white people, you're only then ever going to get talent that is going to fit a certain box. So in order to be able to diversify, you need to go elsewhere. You need to look elsewhere. You're working at the moment with Walmart and within their talent department. What is one of the projects that you're doing currently now that you're really excited about?
Walmart is making really important, by the way, all of the views are mine, not the views of the company I work for. But so one of the things that I say all the time at Walmart and beyond, and I think it's really important to, again, reframe this conversation. If you have a homogenous team, and if you have made a homogenous hires all year, meaning everybody's the same, and I use that word on purpose, because I think that it's really important that our work is always data-driven. The data tends to show that it tends to be white men who make up the majority, but that's not always true. And so it's really important that we are data-driven. So if your team has people that are all the same, homogenous, you haven't hired the best people. You haven't hired the best people, because talent is everywhere. I think we would all agree with that. We would all agree that talent can come from anywhere. And so if you have found 5 people on your team that have come from all the same places, you haven't found the best of the best. You've actually stuck to the status quo. So starting with that, like reframing it, instead of saying, oh, how do I get that one person from this background, or that one person from that background, or that one person who identifies this way, instead reframing it to think, how can I actually be seeking out the best, most diverse, and most innovative thinking styles? Also knowing that with the rate of change that we're experiencing at work, how are we also assessing folks' potential to do the job really well, and not just their past experiences? So one of the many things that we are working on, and I'll start sort of at our broad strategic company-wide view, and then I'll go to one of the specific projects that I'm supporting. But it's the transition to a skills-first basis for hiring. So assessing a person for their skills, their abilities, and their potential to do the job instead of their pedigree and their credentials. I went to Penn. It is an Ivy League institution. I get way more credit than I deserve because of that school that I went to, without people really analyzing or assessing what the skills are that I have to contribute to a role. Not to mention that when I went to Penn, it was like 30% legacy, meaning like 30% of the people who went there, the fact that their parents went there was a factor in considering them for admission. So we should also be thinking about that, especially when we're thinking about skills. What are the skills that people provide? We also know that women and people of color, and particularly women of color, are less likely to enumerate all of their skills and experiences in ways that employers can often resonate with. So we also know that not only do we need to reassess how we're evaluating skills, we also need to provide folks in the market, talent in the market, with the right resources and training to make those skills stand out to people that are looking for talent. So while we have all of these broad scale initiatives that are going on internally, one of the partnerships that my team oversees is a partnership with an organization called 110. And their mission is to hire 1 million Black Americans without college degrees into family sustaining jobs over 10 years. 1 million, 10 years. This has been an amazing partnership. It's a consortium of about 60 companies. And the amazing thing is, it's a really great example of how an increased competition can make things better. It doesn't necessarily mean that it gets ruthless. We all are working together to determine the right ways to select, attract, retain, and advance Black talent. I also want to talk really quickly about something as it relates to this specific initiative with Black talent. So we are making huge strides. It's a really public partnership. We've contributed nearly 25% of the overarching hires for the organization and 33% of the promotions. And this is focused just on Black and African-American talent. And I think that's okay. And the reason I think that's okay is because when you solve for the most excluded groups, everybody ends up feeling more included. And you don't have to take my word for it. There's a ton of empirical evidence for this as well. There's something called the curb cut effect, which has to do with the Americans with Disabilities Act that was passed in the 1970s. And if you come into the US, I think I've only been to London in the UK, so I'm not sure if this is all over London. I mean, all over the UK, but there are those little cuts in the curb, in the sidewalk, those little dips to enter into the road. And when those were mandated in the US in the 70s, it was only for people who used wheelchairs. That was how the design, that was who lobbied for the bill, and that was how it got passed. Everybody uses them. Either you're in a stroller as a baby, or you're pushing a stroller as a parent, or you are older and you're using a cane or a walker, or you're hopping on your bike and you're running errands on your bike. Or you're wearing high heels. Whatever the case might be, everybody uses that. And that's the curb cut effect, that you design an intervention for a group that has been the most excluded and it benefits everybody. Another American example that I love is Sesame Street. I don't know if you've ever seen this children's television program.
Yes.
It was designed for Black children. It was designed for Black children living in the city. It was a very explicit and targeted group that this solution was designed for. And I don't know if you've seen it. It's still one of the top rated programs, and it has helped all children learn their ABCs and learn how to read. So when we actually design for the people who are most excluded, we include everybody even better.
Like, have you faced any challenges?
The hardest thing at a company of our size is operationalizing the strategy and actually executing it across the business. So I made things political, but they don't have to be. They really don't have to be political. And so many things aren't political. Every person I've met and I've spoken to, when I say we want to improve the diversity of the talent pool, everybody's on board. Nobody says no. I don't want more diversity. When we say we want everybody to feel like they can bring their whole selves to work, nobody says no. I want to make sure that so-and-so feels badly for how they show up at work. And that's also sort of ingrained in our company's founding. So Sam Walton was a family man, and he was a very humble person. And it was really important for him that everybody felt respected and everybody felt like they could bring their whole selves to work. It's one of our core values, respect for the individual. And our CEO is a really outspoken and vocal leader, as well as our CHRO and the other executives that I've had the pleasure of meeting. I've been really impressed by their courageous leadership. But as you can imagine, so I said in the talent function, so a lot of what I do is with our hiring practices. When we are as big as we are and trying to scale at the stage that we're trying to scale, and you're probably thinking, wait, like you have 220 million unique customers a week and 5,000 stores. What do you mean you're trying to scale? We are trying to scale to meet the demands of the new consumer who is not only shopping in our stores. And so how do we reinvent our inventory management and our supply chain to bring people the products and services that they need when they need them? There's a lot of agility that's required to get there. And so we are hiring really quickly. And when you are hiring really quickly, it's easy to forget all of the work that's required in ensuring diverse outcomes and ensuring equitable outcomes and ensuring inclusive outcomes. So I think the hearts and mind battle, so to speak, I would say again, I haven't met a person who thinks that diversity at work is a bad thing. And I recognize that that's probably my own bias and all those things. But I haven't met somebody who says, no, I don't want everyone to feel comfortable at work. I think we're all working towards the same things. It's just about how to get there. The commitment is there, and as well as the investment, whether it's in my team or the other center of excellence focused on culture, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the continued expansion of our work with universities in the US and other alternative pathways to getting into work, whether it's like technical boot camps or even government apprenticeships. We are really making a lot of progress, and I'm really proud of Walmart.
Oh, great. That's great to hear. Um, so we've talked about that, what you're really proud of with Walmart. What have you done that for you has been your proudest moment?
At Walmart?
I mean, in your whole journey, really. It doesn't necessarily have to be at Walmart.
My proudest moment is that, so I went to Penn for undergrad, and then I also have a graduate degree from Penn in education. And then it's the only good thing, it's a good school because it's the only school that will let me in. But then I also have a MBA from Wharton. And I think I mentioned I spent time as a middle school math teacher. And one of my students, Harold Anderson, just graduated from Wharton this year.
Oh,
And
that
so
was so lovely.
that is what I'm most proud of, is Harold.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
I think being a teacher it must be the most rewarding when you see your students succeed. And even though you're probably only with them for such a short period, sometimes depending on what age group you're teaching, but to then hear about where they then ended up kind of 3 4 years 5 years later, it must be a really really big achievement. And yeah, I can only imagine it being proud. So that's really nice.
That was flattering that you said only 3, 4, 5 years. It was many more years than that. But yeah, it is amazing. It is amazing. And I'm also so proud of him. He took a full-time role in corporate social responsibility. So he is also a real believer in how much good companies can really do.
Yeah. Oh, fantastic. That's great. Another one to the list.
Yeah.
To creating the change. That's
Yeah.
great. Moving the dial. What has been, so we're going to take it to the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah.
What's been your most challenging so far?
As you could probably tell, I am impatient, and I am constantly thinking about things on an unmanageable scale. So sometimes it is difficult for me to stop and take stock of some of the really amazing things that we've done, because I don't think it's enough. So, some of the amazing things that we've done so far are, we've seen double-digit growth in the number of people from historically excluded backgrounds, who have applied and got hired at Walmart. We've seen double-digit growth for Black and Latino women over the past year. Like that's pretty amazing. We have seen, I mentioned some of the accomplishments with 110. We have revamped our equal employment opportunity statement to make sure that it was even more inclusive and recognized even more identities. We have gotten a hold and a handle on all of the rich data that we have, and we've gotten into a really great reporting cadence with our business partners in a way that we are able to glean not only what the numbers say, but like what to do about those numbers. So we've made a lot of progress, and just because there's more to do, that's okay. That's okay. But it definitely, sometimes I wish we could do more, and we could do it faster.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I think everybody feels like they just want everything to happen now and quickly.
Yes.
So what advice would you give to leaders who feel the same as you, that have that same challenge?
I'm going to read I'm going to read something that one of my mentees actually shared with me. And so she works in DEI, and I was paired with her through a venture capital firm who set up. And she sent this to me the other day, and she says that she reads it often, and it really helped me. So I hope it helps. So there's a long, it's very, very long. So I'll try to cut it short. To do this work as a transgender, non-binary, gender non-conforming person is exhausting. To do this work as a Black person or person of color is exhausting. To do this work as a person who is deeply feeling and empathic is exhausting. Trying to get people to care about things they should inherently care about is exhausting. You're not broken. The systems are broken, and you're not a bad person. Many well-intentioned people just have yet to make hard choices about who they want to be. No matter what, you deserve peace and joy, and peace and joy is the real revolution. It will topple these broken systems. Be kind to yourself.
Wow. That's great. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true though, isn't it?
It is.
And it's one of the toughest things as well, I find, is to be kind to yourself. And when you do feel exhausted, and I think sometimes, maybe I say this as a woman and a mother, in particular, and I feel from the culture that I've come from, the background that I've come from as a Black woman, we tend to always feel like we have to have this strength, and we have to put on the battle armor and kind of push through any sort of difficulties that we're facing, and always kind of look forward and not back. But there comes a point where actually a lot of that takes a toll, and sometimes those bricks are just too heavy to hold. So I think, yeah, that message, I can totally see why that would be so powerful for someone to have a read. And like, I'm going to ask you to send me that to me, because I think it's definitely something that I like, for me, would be great as well, because sometimes you just need a reminder to yourself every now and again to be like, actually, you know what, you're amazing, what you've done is amazing, give yourself a high five, have a glass of prosecco if you drink.
Exactly.
I do.
I do
and
too.
Just chill out.
And that's so inclusive, right? If you drink, like, that's such a great example of how you can just, for a minute, take yourself out of your perspective and remember, just because you love something doesn't mean other people do, and that's okay. You can still be friends. You can still hang out. Totally. You can still have fun. It's all good.
Yeah, no, totally. That's some great advice. Thank you so much, Jessie.
Yeah. Well, it's not, I should say, it is a post by a man named, I'm assuming they're a man. I don't know their pronouns. It's a post by Nick Alm, and the post was sent to me by my mentee, Brooke Graham. So
I
just want to credit them.
Brooke.
Yeah,
thanks,
Brooke's the
no.
best.
And that actually moves me on to my next question for you. It's one of the questions that I ask a lot of the leaders that come on the show. How do you find the balance between work and life?
You have to figure out your own boundaries, whatever that, and you also have to, again, give yourself a break when you inevitably cross them. So I think there's really, it's really about, again, being kind to yourself. For me, what I know is that if I am not taking the time, I really love food, and I really love eating, and I really love cooking. So if I don't take the time to like prepare myself meals, I work from home, prepare myself meals, if I don't take time to move my body that day, whether it's some quick yoga or going for a walk, if I don't take time to sleep, and these are all really basic things that I know not everybody honors for themselves, my work will suffer. More hours do not mean better work. And when I look at the enormity of the task of most of us in our jobs, but I think particularly DEI practitioners, because we're also fighting all these isms and all this stuff. You know, the work isn't going anywhere. It's still going to be there tomorrow. And you have to just check in with yourself. There are all these checklists on burnout. And if you're checking every box, your body keeps the score. And it's going to impact you. So I don't really think it's an option. I think that you have to do the things that will make you feel whole, because it will also make you better at your job.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's the old saying, quality over quantity.
Yes.
And that's the winning one, really, isn't it? I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for joining. So just before you leave us, what is your parting piece of advice that you would like to give to DEI leaders of tomorrow?
Oh my gosh. Remember, when they attack any of us, they attack all of us. And all that is to say, I think we all have one issue or cause or whatever that we identify with for whatever reason, and that's human and that's okay. But it's really important to understand and remember the dignity of all of us, like I said, because when any group of people is attacked for their identity, whether it's in your home country or in another country, that is an attack on humanity. And I know it's a bit cheesy, and I think, you know, if you are a person of faith or a spiritual person, I'm a very spiritual person, and I just believe that we are all waves, so we are all different and unique, and our time on this earth is long or short, and we're really tall or we're really small, but no matter what, we're all part of the same stuff, which is the ocean. And so we are all connected, and I think that we have to get back to that place where we all feel that and believe that. And part of that is, you know, standing up to anywhere you see injustice.
That's great, Jessie. Thank you so much for that parting piece of advice. It's really powerful. Those are powerful words there. And how can our listeners connect with you?
Oh, I would love to meet people, talk to people, especially people who don't agree with me. It's always a great way to learn. My LinkedIn would be the best place, I think. So just Jessie Spellman. I work at Walmart. You'll find me on LinkedIn.
Fantastic. Well, once again, Jessie, thank you so much for joining us today, and all the best for the future.
Thank you so much, Natasha. Thanks for having me.